Um, if you agree with that, then what is, right? So that's the topic for today. I'm just going to pause and ask the external participants, Mega, Rajiv, and Balwant, if you can maybe spend a minute introducing yourself on this call, and then state your interest. What would you like to, what's your interest in attending this session, and what would you like to take away? If you could do
Sure,
that, that'll be great.
sure, Sanjay. I can just introduce. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, I can.
Okay. So, my name is Balwant Rawat. I am responsible for the ideas, or you can say the innovations management, where ideas play a very important role,
Yeah,
which and once we identify the right ideas, we then incubate those ideas so that they can be taken forward for implementation. So the
sure.
topic is interesting, and would be interested to see what's the alternative approach than ideas.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Balwant.
Uh,
Maybe Rajiv, can you go next?
yeah, sure. Hi, Sanjay. It's actually Shashank.
Hi,
Uh,
Sashank.
I'm an intern here. I just graduated from my master's in management and passionate about innovation and everything around organizational agility and organizational innovation. So this is quite an interesting topic, and eager to hear more about it.
So Shashank, where are you? I mean, where are you interning right now?
At MBRDI.
Oh, MBRDA. Okay, got it. All right. Mega.
Yes. Hey, Sanjay, everybody else. Good afternoon. Innovation and this particular topic about ideas-led innovation is quite close to my heart, and I would like to really hear more about it. And I'm quite keen to know why it is not a good idea. So I had a company, Field Easy Technologies. We are deeply into enterprise mobility solutions, ranging from uh, field services management, field sales management, to everything to do with automation using AI and IoT. We provide solutions to Fortune 100 companies and right down to SMBs. So this is a very interesting topic, and I'd like to hear more about it. Thank you.
Great. I think the other folks are from Designs and Change, so I'm going to pass. So thank you for the introductions, and thank you for your interest in this session. So I have spent quite a bit of time focusing on idea-led innovations in large organizations, and some of the things I'm going to share with you today are from those experiences, and also based on some theories that are emerging around innovation that are not necessarily based on sort of idea-led, sort of having idea as the center of their innovation efforts, right? Okay, so the agenda for today is idea-led innovation and its challenges. We'll sort of debate that a little bit. I'd love to hear your perspectives on what are your experiences with doing that. What kind of challenges are you facing, or what kind of maybe you're achieving results that you want to achieve with it. The second is, obviously, we'll talk about, if it's not about ideas, what is it about, right? What is a innovation journey going to look like if it is not about ideas? And then we'll talk about a case study of where I was involved in this for many years in this particular case, and we'll talk about it specifically how this comes to life in a large organization. And then finally, if you have any questions, we can take them towards the end as well. So, and please keep typing your questions in the chat box as and when you get them. We'll get to them at the end. Yeah. Okay. So for the purposes of this discussion, we just kind of, innovation is an often used, maybe abused word these days, but we'll start with a very simple, hopefully practical, and you'll agree that that it's a good definition. Is, innovation is basically creating better results, and if you're a business, creating better business results by doing new things, or by improving things that are already there, right? So it's a very simple definition, but I for the purposes of this discussion, we'll stick with it. Now, most innovation efforts, when we say innovation, often the light bulb picture comes to mind, where we are kind of trying to equate innovation to sort of a idea of sorts, right? Ideas are usually at the center of our most of sort of the innovation efforts of many organizations in the world. My first question to you, sort of a poll question, maybe since we have only 3 external participants, Balwant, Shashank, and Mega, maybe you can just type your responses in the chat window, if that's okay. Are your current innovation efforts today, are they idea, are ideas central to your innovation efforts today? You can just type yes or no to that question quickly, so that I get a sense for, okay, I'm getting some responses. Yeah. So as you can see, most innovation efforts where the central sort of unit of progress, of analysis, is usually the idea, right? Now, I was going to ask you, I was curious if somebody would say, no, it's not the idea, it's something else. Then I was going to ask you a follow-up question, but anyway, in this case, it doesn't matter. So we'll move on. Now, let's start with the problem, right? I'm going to give you guys a problem, and I don't know how many, maybe you guys have come across this problem already. The problem is this, right? Imagine you are the owner of an office building, a multi-story office building, and your tenants are complaining about the elevator. It's old and slow, and they have to wait a lot. Okay, and several tenants are threatening to break their leases if you don't fix the problem, right? Question is, what ideas can you suggest to solve the problem? Again, type away your responses, as many ideas as you can think of in the chat box. What ideas can you think of? So we're basically doing a like a virtual brainstorming session of sorts, right? What ideas can you think of to solve the problem? I see Nitya has joined. Nitya, welcome. Good afternoon. We just got started. I hope all of you are able to see the slides. So imagine you're the owner of an office building. The tenants are coming and complaining to you that the elevators are too slow. If you don't fix them, they'll vacate the building. What ideas can you suggest to solve the problem? We'll give it a minute. See what ideas you can come up with. Okay, Mega saying cost-effective solution, give incentives, start using the staircase, replace the faster elevator, add more elevators, make the waiting time more interesting. Okay. Okay. Very nice. Okay. Okay. So we'll come back to these responses. For the moment, we will stay with it, and I promise we'll come back. For the moment, we'll move on. Yeah. Okay, so brainstorming like this, right? What we just did is a often used technique, and there's various versions of brainstorming, but it's largely about getting people together and asking them to just think about ideas and having them contribute. Maybe some of you in your organizations have sort of these online suggestion box kind of systems, idea management systems, where you collect ideas, you sort through those ideas, and so on. But the heart of that is sort of this technique called brainstorming, right? And the assumptions are that if I just think hard enough and look deeper and deeper in my own mind, I'm going to come up with good ideas. The other thing is that brainstormings often produce what are known as idea missions. This comes from a guy called Frederick Harron, who's an expert in creativity and innovation. An idea mission is basically a mashup of 2 words, idea and information. So most of the ideas that your teams are giving you are really just information masquerading as ideas, right? So they already have some information, and they just sort of present it, right? Now, whereas strategic breakthroughs happen when you combine what you know, that is what you have in your mind, with what comes from the outside, and you combine that in unexpected ways, right? And we'll talk about this a little bit more. And the other thing, the problem with brainstorming is also that if you are in routine operations work, you can't afford to do brainstorming, right? Like, you can't take time off and do brainstorming because the routine work itself is taking up a lot of your time. The severe limitations with brainstorming, and brainstorming is not, uh, not necessarily, proven to yield great results with respect to ideas and innovation. The other approach is to kind of go to brainstorm island, so to speak, right? Which is, you go for an offsite of some sort, which is sort of an innovation vacation. And you obviously plan it, and there's usually some facilitators coming in, doing the offsite, facilitating the offsite. People come up with a lot of good ideas, colorful ideas. It's very invigorating. The experience itself is very invigorating. However, when you return to the work mainland from the brainstorm island, it there's nothing really changes. The sort of the old ways kind of are there, and nothing really changes. Pretty much everything is back to business as usual, right? So brainstorming, which is sort of the central technique, doesn't seem to work really well most of the time. So this is going to be a poll question, and maybe we can turn out the poll, right? So think about, all of you said that you're doing idea-led innovation, as a main sort of effort, the main way you think about innovation. So think about these challenges, and then pick one, right? And maybe Pavitra, my colleague Pavitra, if you can open up this question for the participants, and they can pick, they can respond to that question. Yeah, so the poll is on. Just think about, what are the challenges. You can pick one or more, I think. Multiple choice question. What are your current challenges with idea-led innovation? Employees pursue random ideas, don't matter to the business, and end up with side projects that don't go anywhere. Our teams have a lot of ideas, but they don't go anywhere. They don't get implemented. Some ideas do get implemented. They're mostly quick wins, and most don't create breakthrough improvements in performance and results. There are no takers for implemented ideas. Most of our ideas are, keys looking for a door, or solutions looking for problems. Most ideas that we collect from our employees are not worth implementing. Those are your 5 choices. You can pick one or more. Okay, I'm starting to see some results. Okay, I'll give it another 10 seconds, and then okay, 4 people have responded, and it looks like it's an even split between the first 3 choices. I'm going to end the poll now, and it looks like it's an even split between the first 3 choices. I hope you can see the poll results. The first 3, which is employees pursue random ideas, they don't matter to business. Our team has a lot of ideas but don't get implemented. Some ideas do get implemented, but there are usually not very high impact results, which is interesting. So my experience is also very similar, right? With the sort of the idea-led efforts, is that either people are doing some projects which doesn't matter, or the more bigger problem that I've seen is lots of ideas, but none of them get implemented. Even if they get implemented, they are very, very, they're very sort of quick wins, low hanging fruit type of ideas. Okay, moving on. So hopefully you kind of at least are intrigued by the question that, if it's not about ideas, what is it about? And hopefully you agree with me that the idea-led innovation efforts are very suboptimal, and we can debate that maybe during the Q&A if you're not, if you're not sure about it, or if you want to sort of get more clarity. Um, yeah. So if it's not about ideas, what is it about, right? What to do instead? So you've got to move your attention from ideas to the context around the idea, right? The context from which the idea emerged and the context in which the idea has to coexist if it has to survive and become viable, right? A lot of effort goes into just optimizing and perfecting the idea itself, whereas idea has to live within an ecosystem, within a context, right? There's a customer context, there's a problem context, there is an existing operational context, there's an existing culture context, there's a competition. All this adds to the part of the context, right? What is the context around the idea? So when we say context, this is what we mean, right? Now, this is not an exhaustive list, but the customer, problem, existing alternatives, and the systems, these are very key aspects of the context, right? Now, another way of saying it is that instead of focusing on the idea, you should be focusing on the customer and their problem, right? I mean, I'm sure you've heard this thing, but it's not just the customer and their problem, it's the entire context around the idea. And that's where most of your efforts needs to shift from the idea itself, right? And kind of tweaking the idea and generating more ideas and, all that stuff we are used to doing today. Now, you do that by you got systems, right? So these contexts are systems that are already in place, especially in large organizations. These are well established systems, right, that shape the current behaviors, work environments, and the way, and it shapes how people behave, right? So you need to fight systems with systems, in the sense that you need to bring in new elements into the system so that you create at least start nudging the work environment in such a way that you support behaviors that connects idea with its context continuously. This is very key. It's not about we're not saying, oh, we should abandon ideas, right? That's not what this is about. Then what we are saying is that you need to create a context, you need to create a work environment where the ideas are in touch with its context continuously. And that's the process of moving from an idea to an innovation. Now we're revisiting the slow elevator problem, and I think a lot of you, gave your sort of suggestions, right? Same problem, but then if this problem is given to a building manager, they suggest a more elegant solution. They say put up mirrors next to the elevator. Now this could be one answer for what Balwant, I think, came up with, which is make the wait more interesting or something like that, right? Let me just see. Yeah, make the waiting time more interesting, right? Instead of fixing the elevator or giving them incentives to take the stairs. Now the thing is that we don't know what's the right solution to this problem, right? But building managers who have looked at this problem, who have tried many things with this problem, usually suggest put up mirrors next to the elevator. And the question is, what made them come up with this solution versus, the novices like you and I, who do not come up with that as a typical solution, right? It's usually upgrading the elevator or giving them incentives, getting people to take the stairs, and so on and so forth. What made them come up with this solution, right? Let's look at that. So there is this thing called reframing. That is, you reframe the thing from, it's a way of perceiving things, right? Reframing is a way of perceiving things by focusing on the context around the idea. So if you take the problem as it is given, the elevator is too slow, then you're going to come up with these kinds of solutions, which is make the elevator faster, install a new lift, upgrade the motor, improve the algorithm, etc., etc. Whereas if you reframe the problem into something that said it's not the elevator is too slow, but the wait is annoying, right? Then you come up with a very different set of solutions that are very much aligned with what Balwant said, which is make the wait more interesting, right? How can we make the wait feel more shorter or more interesting? Then you come up with a very different set of solutions. Now you're able to reframe because you get more information about the context in which the problem has emerged, right? In which so you don't take the problem as stated or granted. You go and actually look into the context around where this is coming from, right? The customer and their problem, right? And then you start to see, okay, maybe it's not really a technical problem with the elevator, or maybe it is, but we can't do anything about it. But there is a problem where people are frustrated waiting for the elevators. So you have a very different understanding of the problem. This is not to say that there is only one problem. The point of reframing is not to find the real problem, but rather it is to see that there's a better one to solve. And the better is very subjective to your organizational context, right? There is no objective measurement of better. So identifying a different aspect of the problem or coming to a different understanding of the problem can sometimes deliver radical improvements. Again, as you see, what happened here is we moved from the idea, jumping into creating ideas, to taking a step back and looking at the context a little bit, right, around which the idea could emerge, or in which the idea could emerge, and different ideas could emerge from there, right? Okay, now let's dive even deeper to understand the aspect, what we call as creativity. Where do ideas really come from, and what is an idea anyway? So the three aspects that creates ideas or sort of strategic insights, right, if you will. One is intelligence. Intelligence is fundamentally what is, which is understanding reality, getting closer to reality, which is what is. Then imagination. Imagination is what could be, right? So intelligence is what is in the current, or in the, what is actually happening. And imagination is how could we change it, or what could we do to change it. And then combining these two is creativity, right? Combining what is with the possibilities of what could be is what we generally call as creativity, or the creative potential. Now, this process creates idea. An idea is basically one person taking two formally known things and combining them in a new way. Now, what this also means is that there are no new ideas in the world. When we say it's a new idea, what we actually mean is that the way in which previously known elements have been combined is a very creative, or they've been combined in an unexpected way. That's what it means actually. Okay, so the big insight here is that there are no new ideas in the world. There are only combinations of already known things that are combined in very different ways. The more different and more unexpected they are, the more creative the idea. Otherwise, the less creative the idea. That's all there is to it. Now, so idea is basically people combining knowledge and information that they already know or come to know in different ways, right? In new ways, right? Now, if you look at intelligence and imagination, is a function of knowledge and information, right? You need to feed your intelligence by looking at reality more closely. You need to feed your imagination by looking at, okay, what are some ideas what are some ways in which people have already solved this problem in different domains, right? It's not like we are the first person trying to solve this problem, or this kind of a problem. And then combining that, and for that that is a very much a people, and the combination of these two, the combination of these two types of inputs, right, which is what we call as creativity. Essentially, when you say you want more ideas, I think some of you mentioned that you're not getting ideas that are worth implementing, right? You chose some of those options, and we talked about idea-led innovation. So we need more new input, which is intelligence and imagination. And we need more time, space for reflection or focus. And we need to nurture the creative potential in our teams, right? In our employees, right? In our colleagues and in ourselves. It's not that human beings don't have creative potential. Every human being has creative potential. The question is, are we realizing that potential? And usually what comes in the way of that is these three things, right? There's not enough input. We're kind of stuck in the box. When we say get out of, think out of the box, I think this is what we mean, right? Get new input, right? Don't just be stuck in the box and think within the box, right? Because then you're going to come up with very stale ideas that are based on stale input that you already know and everybody knows and all that stuff. Hopefully this makes sense. Okay, so now we're going to go and talk about, I'm just going to quickly go through some things you can do. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this to kind of nudge your teams and to kind of rechannelize your innovation efforts away from ideas into these contexts that we're talking about. So the first theme is direction, right? Just telling people, I'm not going to go through all these slides in detail in the interest of time. By the way, we'll send you a PDF version of the slides if you are interested. Um, the thing to remember is that innovation benefits from direction. Focus beats freedom. The idea of just asking people, hey, just give us your ideas, actually doesn't really work very well. Because people are often confused about what should it actually give you ideas about, and they often end up giving ideas about what they already are, what they already know. And if these are if there are these are the sort of people who are doing operational work, kinds of ideas you're going to get are also very operational in nature, right? So the ideas of the kind of cost savings, or something can be done faster, things like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong in that. I think it's good. But if you're looking for more strategic ideas, more breakthrough ideas, or more out of the box ideas, as we call it, you are typically don't get them from these sort of practices of just asking people to give ideas. A better way to do that is to constrain the idea, constrain the process by saying, here's the problem that we are facing. Can you suggest? So again, see, when you say here's the problem, you're giving them new input. So they take that new input, they combine it with whatever they already know in terms of knowledge, information about their work and about what it means to this problem, and they come up with ideas that are much, much better. Okay, so here the focus and focusing it on a particular problem is very important. Just asking people to think out of the box is just not going to help. I think. I mean, I've tried this. I'm sure you guys have tried this. I don't think it doesn't seem to work really well. Okay, the second theme is that insight comes from outside, right? This is the point I made about there are no new ideas, right? It's just most ideas are pieced together by combining existing pieces of knowledge in new ways. So in a sense, innovation is like a puzzle. An idea is just one piece of the puzzle. This is the important thing to understand. It is not the piece, it is just one piece, and the other pieces are scattered in the context around the idea, or in the situation where this opportunity or this challenges come up. So how can you connect people to the outside information, outside knowledge? What do we mean by that? You can do that in three ways. Connect people to the world of the customer, right? What is the customer and their problem, right? Connect people to their colleagues. There are a lot of, in large companies, you'll be surprised by, there are solutions that people have already thought about and maybe even implemented in another department or function that could actually solve an aspect of your problem, right, that you're wondering about, or maybe even help you redefine the problem because they have gone through that journey already. It may not be the same exact problem, but there are elements that you can repurpose and reuse, which means that you have to start connecting, which is another form of outside input that you can bring and connect people to new and unrelated worlds, right? So there are ideas in other domains which can solve the problems that you're looking at, right? And a lot of the great discoveries come through this kind of a connection. So essentially what you got to do is create these rituals and spaces. You need to kind of structure these things and design for these things in your regular work environment so that this can happen more. Okay, the third theme is the first version of ideas are all flawed, right? Which is to say that don't trust the perfection of the initial idea. Although in the person who comes up with the idea, in their head it seems very perfect. But successful innovation is not found, they are developed, right? You don't find a great idea, you develop a great innovation from bits and pieces of an idea as well as the other pieces that are floating around in the context. What needs development is just not the solution, but also the understanding of the problem, right? The understanding of the problem, again, lies deep in the problem space, which is part of the context that you need to be focusing on. Successful innovators are not solution finders, they are expert problem finders. There are two ways you can actually do this. First is reframing the problem, which is what we looked at in the slow elevator problem. Hopefully you have an idea of how to do that. Second is, and this is the part about creativity or thinking in a certain way, or bringing your mind to think in a certain way. Prototypes are usually seen as validation tools, right? I think what is often missed in prototyping is they're also thinking tools actually, because prototypes actually makes your ideas super clear and real actually, so that you can test them, learn from them, and so on. And this is where things like design thinking, that kind of approach comes in, where there's a lot of emphasis: agile design thinking, lean startup, sort of this action learning kind of category of methods. And what is also important is to expose people, the people who are working on the idea, right, developing the idea, the solution, right, expose them feedback that emerges from the context. This is very critical. When we test ideas, we don't test the idea itself, we test for how the idea sits within the context, right? Which is another way of saying is that you got to ask yourself, are your ideas usable or useful? There's a world of difference between the two. You could have a very usable idea that nobody uses, right? That's no good. That's not an innovation, right? Okay, I'm going to move on. In the interest of time, I'm going to just keep moving. So innovation is about commitment, right? So the difference between successful innovators and others is persistence. And I'm sure you can remember some quotes from Edison and others who talks to this. It's not that they persist with the idea, they persist with the context around the idea. Successful innovators, by the way, are not confident about their idea. They're constantly doubting their own idea. That sense of doubt, that sense of uncertainty makes them look at the context repeatedly. This is what makes them successful. So what kills an innovation is not a lack of merit or novelty of the idea, it's a lack of commitment. And building commitment, you can't build commitment with great ideas, because if you are from marketing, you might think in terms of marketing oriented ideas, right? You might see the problem as a marketing problem. If you're a technology person, you will think the problem is a technology problem. If you're a salesperson, you'll think the problem is a sales problem. So you can't do a meeting, come to a meeting of minds by just focusing on whether my idea is better than either the marketing way is better or the sales way is better, the technology way better or product way better. You can't do that. If you want to really converge, you want to look at the context and get clarity around the context. That way you can actually build a sense of shared commitment and vision, and bring people together and get people committed to that context rather than the idea itself. Okay, I'm going to talk about this case study, which is, a large IT services company. This is within the IT function. The CIO wanted to move from building technology to solving business problems, right? I think if you're familiar with IT, one of the biggest challenges that IT is what is known as the IT business connect, right? What they mean by that is that, IT folks, the business folks often complain that the IT folks don't understand the business problems. And the IT folks often complain the business folks don't understand the technology complexity and what it takes to build great technology. And this has been there for decades in the field of IT. But anyway, the CIO wanted to actually move and really make an impact with the business, with the employees, because the employees were complaining that systems are too slow and too cumbersome and they don't necessarily help them, etc. So there's an IT team of about 800 to 1,000 engineers, analysts, and project managers. Let's look at what they did. And by the way, this was a multi-year journey. Went on for about 3 or 4 years. They built skills in empathy, observation, and problem discovery. In other words, they actually focused more on the context around in which ideas emerge, rather than the idea management and having people to generate ideas, right, in a fun and engaging way. So I was involved with this team. So we did things like, we used to call them bear hug workshops, which are about building empathy, right? And how do you practice empathy in the work environment along with your customer for whom you're trying to solve problems. We used to send teams of people on these missions where they would go and immerse themselves in the context and come back with newfound awareness. And then, organizing hackathons, not just around building great technology, but around actually solving business problems. So hackathons are focused on specific problems and challenges, specific things that we wanted to improve upon, that we knew were real problems because we had gathered some of that information from the context. And then again, building awareness around rapid prototyping. How do you actually do rapid prototyping? How do you take an idea and then make it into a prototype so that it becomes more real? Giving them the tools like a sandbox and so on. brought in thought leaders. This is the leaders from other domains, leaders who can come and talk about just exposing the teams to different worlds, and ideas. This was done once a year in the form of a learning summit. And then we also roped in the CFO as the exec sponsor. Right? It's one of the things I didn't talk about earlier, which is to kind of build an alliance, so to speak, right? Because I think one of the things that is often least understood about innovation is that innovation is also about leveraging the politics of the organization. So it's not just about just the merit of great ideas. It's also about politics. So you need to find these power brokers in the organization, that somebody who wants to get behind some of these initiatives. The important thing is we did not focus on idea generation campaigns, brainstorming sessions, idea suggestion box solutions, none of that stuff. Zero of that. What results did we achieve? Over 98% of the organization, this is a large organization spread across multiple countries, started using what the IT team was building. And when I say using, I mean really using and giving great feedback. Okay, both good and bad, but they were engaging in the process. In some areas, we were able to achieve some 500% increase in employee productivity. Not in all areas, but in some areas. And some of the innovations were, so it became a case study, and it was taken to this organization's customer. It was a services organization, and it was taken to its customers, and then it was recognized both inside as well as in the industry for the kind of innovations that it produced. Right? This happened again over a period of 4 years or so, 4 to 5 years, but a very, very successful sort of innovation journey. And the thing to note here is that it was less about ideas. Of course, ideas were there, but it was not about just kind of working with the ideas and so on. So in summary, innovation is not about the idea. This is our point of view, right? The designs and change point of view around this is that innovation is not about the idea. The sooner we acknowledge this, the sooner we can get on to the real work of innovation. Innovation is like a puzzle, which we already talked about. Idea is just one piece of the puzzle. The other pieces are distributed in the context. So if you begin to let go of the notion that the idea is central to innovation and focus on the context in which the idea needs to exist or move forward, then you can make better progress. Shift from thinking about ideas and asking people to think about ideas into actions and enabling actions in the work environment that are required to see and connect with the context. Get your people to see the context and connect with the context. And if you do that, ideas are often the byproduct of those sort of actions. So that is all we have for today. I just wanted to open it up to questions. I know some other folks also joined. Let me just see. Pradeep, ready? Welcome. Okay, so questions, and we'll open it up, and please feel free to either type in your questions or you can ask.
So I have a question here. This is Mega.
Yes, Mega.
How do you, in the initial phases of this exercise, which you did particularly in this case study, how did you ensure that the motivation levels were high enough for them to go through the first few hoops?
Yeah, so the one is, as I said, one is to see what motivates people is to help other people, right? Especially your customer. The more clarity you can bring around customer and their struggles, the motivation levels automatically increase. So motivation is nothing but the amount of energy you bring to a particular task, let's say, right? Doing things, or some decisions you have to make, some tasks you have to do. What is the energy you bring to that, right? Typically, the motivation levels are suboptimal, largely because there are 2 or 3 things missing. One is autonomy, right? People don't have a lot of freedom to choose, right? Very limited freedom. And second is parity around purpose, right? oftentimes people that are in operational roles don't understand why they are operating in a certain way, or why they've been asked to do certain things. What does a particular operating metric really mean to the customer, and so on and so forth. Second is the lack of, they can relate to something larger than what they are doing today. That's the second aspect. And the third aspect is, sort of ability to push themselves and learn, So if we can bring some of these elements, so in this case, what we did was, we didn't tell them what they should do. We gave them the environment, we gave them the tools so that they can actually go and immerse themselves and see for themselves how people are using or abusing the products that the services and innovations, or the applications in this case, that they were building, and they were, there are a lot of surprises there, right? So you design something for a certain purpose, but then it's not used in that way, or it's not used at all, or people often complain about it, and they have their own workaround that they have made, because they're not using your solution. So this inspires people to actually fix him, right? So once you show people this, connect them with the context, and they have this clarity, then you give them the freedom and say, look, okay, you have the sandbox where you can try these untested actions, right? Or you have a way of, before you implement this idea, here are the steps you should follow so that you don't end up messing with the current operation. If you give them some guardrails, but within those guardrails, you give them the freedom, you'll be very surprised to see how people automatically rise, their motivation, they're very inspired to sort of act. And of course, you top that up with some very nicely designed incentives and so on, but that is just sort of the icing on the cake, right? But the cake has to be there, which is kind of tapping into the human motivation, intrinsic motivation to actually solve problems and make their customers' world into a better place. So that's what largely drove the motivational levels in this, in this case of the IT services firm.
Excellent. Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? If you want to, feel free to comment. I mean, what did you thought about the session? What did you take away? Maybe we can go around and love to hear your perspectives on this. What are you challenged with? Not sitting very well with you. So let's see here. Maybe we'll start with Balwant.
So I like the context piece of it, especially the problem framing. So once you receive an idea, then so typically the first step is to validate the context and asking what problems are there. So how do you make it as a change in the culture piece? Or is it part of the standard process you need to do, or does it how does it automatically come or imbibed in the culture of the organization?
Yeah, like I said, is that a question, Balwant? I mean, I was not sure actually.
Yeah, so something that if you are following that approach, you can do it in a certain campaign or other things. But if there is something that like this can be imbibed in the culture of the organization, is there a way in which that can be done?
So we look at culture by design, right? So we look at things from a human system, right? So culture is in place. Culture is just nothing but a set of norms that are shortcuts for decision making. When people, culture is like, people say this is how things are done around here, right? They've come to be that way because it's designed like that, right? So whether intentionally or not, it's designed like that. So when we look at culture, that's what we mean by fighting systems with systems, right? So you need to understand why the current culture is in the way it is, and what aspects of it can you change. For example, in your next status meeting or ideation meeting or whatever, we have these rituals, right? We have these meetings. Now, what aspect can you change in that meeting? One small aspect that you can change so that you can move towards this new culture, right? So in your idea generation efforts, in your idea management process, right? Of where you ask for ideas, select ideas, all that stuff. What can you change? How can you change that? For example, I can say, okay, you can submit ideas, but then we will take it forward only if you show us some simple demo or prototype. Okay, and obviously you need to enable them to do that as well. So, but it's a combination of behaviors, structures that you need to change, incentives that you can change, but it doesn't have to be a big change, right? It's, culture change efforts work well when you start small and you start, building this system, this new system that is starting to come up against the old system. It has to coexist with the old system for a period of time, and then it will start to subsume the old system, right? That's how culture change efforts, successful culture change efforts happen. Most culture change efforts are not thought of like that, right? They just thought of as, you see, culture is more like a shadow. You can't go and fix a shadow, right? You can only fix the elements that create the shadow, which is what? Movement and structure. If you go after movement and structure that creates the shadow, which you call as culture, then slowly you can change the shadow, which means you'll have a new culture. Does that help?
Yeah, quite useful. Thanks.
And Balwant, if you have any specific things, we can talk offline and about, hey, this is the thing, what kind of things can we change, right, in our existing routines and rituals to start moving in this direction. Cool. Let's see. Okay. Nitya, you want to say something? I know you joined a bit late. Were you able to follow the session? I'm not sure. Maybe Shashank wants to say something.
Hi, Sanjay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I found it interesting what you said about looking into the context. In design thinking, what we usually do is we use empathy mapping or empathy to try to identify the real problem and or try to define the real problem as opposed to what we see, which could be the symptom of it. So I did draw some parallels to that, but it was quite interesting to see the context approach as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So word on design thinking, I think, yes. So these kind of classes of methods like design thinking kind of broadens your perspective and takes you more around the context. But it's important that we let go of the idea for us to gain the maximum from those efforts. I've seen a lot of design thinking efforts which are still hung up on the idea, right? They do obviously some empathy and all that stuff. Empathy, they do some empathy mapping, but the results are very suboptimal, actually.
Mm-hmm,
Right?
mm-hmm.
Okay? So for you to really get more optimal results, the central thing is you need to let go of this notion that innovation is about ideas, right?
Right.
Idea is fundamentally a byproduct. Innovation is about the context. And by the way, there is no such thing as the real problem, right? There are
Correct.
several real problems that you need to tackle because problems are usually multi-causal, which means that there's no such thing as the problem, right? At least when you look at complex problems, right? I mean, simple problems, of course, you can, depends on how you look at it. Simple problems, you can easily look at it and solve it yourself and so on. When it comes to, combining with other people and so on, it becomes very difficult to. So this whole perception around the problem space and gaining skills to see, one of the most underrated skills in organizations is problem discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also one of the most strategic skills, actually. So if you're really looking for competitive advantage and competing by innovation and all that, what I would strongly recommend is you got to really work on problem discovery skills, not so much ideation skills. I think that we've got it. What is a problem? So there's a whole vocabulary that you can build around it. There are ways of actually developing those skills, and of course, empathizing and empathy maps are a set of tools that you can start using.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjay.
All right. I think we've got like 5 minutes. If there are no other comments and questions, I think we can wrap up. One thing I want to ask you guys is, we want to build a community of people that are reimagining, rethinking, innovating innovation itself. And if you guys want to be part of that community, please do let us know, right? And by community, we don't, imagine anything fancy, but getting together once in a while like this and just talking about stuff so that we can learn from each other. And So it's a community of practitioners, of enthusiasts who are very enthusiastic about innovation. I think you have Shikhar's email. If you can drop in a mail saying that you're interested and you'd like to keep in touch, and we'll include you on the on the sort of the community group.
Sure, that's a good idea.
All right, wonderful. Thank you very much for your time and engagement. Have a good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thanks,
Thank you, Sanjay.